book was the wrong one, and I almost put it back. I was standing in the travel section of Halcyon Books, the kind of independent bookstore that still has a cat sleeping on the front counter and handwritten staff pics taped to the shelves, when I reached for a copy of a photography book I had been looking for the past 3 weeks. My hand closed around the spine and I pulled it out. It was the right title, wrong edition. The one I wanted had the expanded plate section in the back. This one didn't. I slid it back onto the shelf and muttered something unflattering under my breath. That was when I saw her. She was one section over in architecture, crouched down to read the lower shelf with her head tilted sideways. Dark hair pulled back loosely, a few pieces escaping near her ear. She wore a gray wool coat that looked like it had been expensive once and was better for it now. One hand was pressed flat against the shelf for balance. The other held a book she wasn't reading yet, just gripping it by the cover like she hadn't decided about it. I noticed her the way you notice a song playing somewhere in a building before you can identify where it's coming from. I went back to looking for my book. I didn't find it. I moved down 2 shelves, checked the photography section more carefully, and started to accept that I was going to have to order it online, like a person who had given up on serendipity. Then I turned around to leave and nearly stepped on a small paperback sitting on the floor near the base of the shelf. I looked down. It was a book on structural photography, the kind of niche overlap between architecture and visual art that probably had a print run of 4,000 copies. I picked it up to set it back somewhere reasonable. The woman in the gray coat was standing at the end of the aisle. She was looking at me, not in an alarmed way, more like she had been watching to see what I would do with it. "Is this yours?" I asked. She studied me for a second. "Did it fall from a shelf?" "It was on the floor." "Then it probably fell from a shelf." She smiled just a little, like she was being technically accurate on purpose. I looked at the book again, then back at her. "Do you want it anyway?" "I was going to buy it," she said, "but I haven't decided yet." I held it out. She came down the aisle and took it from me, and when she did, our hands didn't touch, but it was close. She looked at the cover, then turned it over to read the back. "Are you into structural photography?" I asked because I apparently couldn't help myself. She looked up. "Are you?" "I'm a photographer, so yes." Her eyes moved over my face once, the way people do when they're updating a first impression. "What do you shoot?" "Architecture mostly, commercial work, some editorial." She looked back at the book in her hands. "I'm an architect," she said. I laughed once. "So we both wandered into the wrong section." "I'm not sure it's the wrong section," she said. She tucked the book under her arm, like the decision had been made. "I just haven't been in the right one yet." She walked past me toward the front of the store, and I stood in the aisle for a moment, not entirely sure what had just happened. By the time I checked out, empty-handed, because the edition I wanted truly was not there, she was gone. I told myself that was a fine ending to the story, a small, pleasant moment. Those existed. They didn't all have to go somewhere. I went back to Halcyon Books 4 days later. I told myself it was because I wanted to check if the right edition had come in. This was mostly true, and also entirely not the point. She wasn't there. I went back the following Saturday. This time I actually asked the woman at the front desk about the photography book. She checked the system, told me they could order it, and wrote down my name and number. Her name tag said Bex. She seemed kind. She also seemed like she could tell I had been in the store recently without buying anything, because she gave me the mildly sympathetic look of someone who worked in a place where people came to feel better and sometimes didn't. I bought a novel I didn't need and left. The Saturday after that, I almost didn't go back. I had a full afternoon. A shoot fell through, which meant unexpected free time, and I was standing in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about all the productive things I could do with it. I went to Halcyon Books instead. The cat was asleep in a different spot near the window. Bex wasn't working. A younger guy with a nose ring was behind the counter. I walked back toward the photography section and stopped. She was there, same gray coat, different book in her hand this time, but the same posture, head slightly tilted, weight back on one heel, giving the thing she was reading her full attention without being dramatic about it. She looked up when I came around the corner, and she didn't look surprised. "You again?" she said. "Me again." She went back to the page she was on. I stood there for a second trying to decide if I should pretend I had come for the book, which Bex had told me was now available to order. Then I decided the charade had a low ceiling. I don't actually have a great reason for being here, I said. She turned a page. You don't need one, it's a bookstore. I pulled a book off the shelf at random, something about brutalist architecture that I had zero plan to buy, and stood there with it. Fair point. She closed her book after another minute and looked at me properly. I'm Ren, she said. Ren. It fit her in the way that some names do, like whoever gave it to her had known something. I told her my name. She repeated it once, not to confirm it, more like she was filing it somewhere. You're the photographer, she said. And you're the architect. I design adaptive reuse projects, she said. Old buildings repurposed for new uses. What kind? Right now, a former textile mill in Lowell, converting it to mixed-income housing and a community workshop space. I looked at her. I shot a project in a converted mill in Providence 2 years ago, a gallery space. Her expression shifted just slightly, the way it does when something unexpected aligns. Did you like it? I liked the bones, I said. The new work tried a little too hard. She almost smiled. That's the challenge. The building has a history. You can't just decorate over it. We talked for 40 minutes standing in the architecture section of Halcyon Books. She was direct in the way that people are when they stopped caring about small talk somewhere along the way and never went back for it. She didn't ask questions to fill silence. She asked them because she wanted the answers. At one point, she challenged something I said about natural light in industrial spaces, and she was right. And when I conceded she didn't make anything of it, she just moved on. When she finally said she had to leave, I felt the afternoon close behind her faster than it should have. Same time next Saturday? I asked. She picked up her bag. I don't make plans in bookstores, she said. Then she left. I stared at the brutalist architecture book in my hands and put it back where I found it. She was there the next Saturday, same section, earlier than before. This time she had coffee in a travel mug, and she poured some into the little secondary cup the lid detached into, and handed it to me without asking if I wanted it. You don't know how I take it, I said. You look like a black coffee person. I was a black coffee person. What gave it away? Your jacket has 2 pockets and you only use one, she said. People who take their coffee complicated keep their options open. I stared at her. That is not a system. It works for me. That became a kind of thing between us. She had theories about people. Small ones. Observational. The kind that sounded absurd until they were exactly right. I started bringing better counterarguments each week, just to see if I could knock one over. I never fully could. She conceded partial credit once, when I pointed out a flaw in her interpretation of a regular customer near the front, who she had decided was a retired academic. Turns out, he was a retired electrician, who read voraciously. She said that proved her point about assumptions. I said it disproved her method. We disagreed for 15 minutes and neither of us convinced the other, but we were both smiling by the end. By the 4th Saturday, I was arriving early. By the 5th, I stopped pretending I had any reason to be there other than her. One afternoon in late October, she came in carrying a rolled set of drawings under one arm and a look on her face like the day had not cooperated. She dropped into the chair near the window. Halcyon had 2 chairs wedged between the poetry section and the back wall, and set the drawings on the floor beside her. Bad day? I asked. Zoning board, she said. They approved the footprint but pushed back on the window specifications. They want uniform glazing on the street-facing facade. She said it like she was describing something morally objectionable. Is that a problem? The windows are original 1890s industrial frames. They're part of the building's identity. Putting uniform glazing over them would be... She stopped, decorating over the history. She used the same phrase she'd used the first day we talked properly. I remembered it because she meant it both times. Can you appeal it? I'm going to. She picked up the book she'd set in the chair when she sat down. She had started leaving one there like a placeholder and didn't open it. Tell me something that has nothing to do with buildings. I thought about it. I had a client last week who wanted me to make his office lobby look more authentic. She looked up. What does that mean? He wasn't sure. He just wanted it to feel like it had always been there. What did you do? I told him to add a water stain. She blinked once. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one, short and sudden, like it surprised her. She looked briefly annoyed at herself for it. What did he say? She asked. He hired someone else. That made her laugh again, and this time she let it. I had been thinking about asking her to dinner for 2 weeks. I couldn't find the right angle on it. With most people, there's a moment that makes the question feel natural. With Ren, every moment felt both like the right one and one that might get me a clean, direct answer I wasn't ready for. Eventually, I stopped looking for the right moment and just asked. I want to take you somewhere that isn't this bookstore, I said on a Thursday evening when she'd come in on an off day, and so had I. She looked at me steadily. Where? There's a place on Tremont called Moreau's. They have good food, and they don't play music loud enough to ruin a conversation. Is this a date? She asked. Yes. She picked up the book she'd been considering. Saturday, she said. 7. Moreau's was quiet and warm, the kind of restaurant where the lighting was low enough to be intimate without being dramatic about it. Ren wore dark green, which I wouldn't have predicted, and which worked perfectly. She ordered a glass of burgundy and studied the menu with the same focused attention she gave everything. Over dinner, she talked about the mill project more. The structural challenges. The conversations with the Historic Preservation Office. The way she'd had to fight for details that most people walking through the finished space would never consciously notice. I watched her talk about it and thought that the thing she was really describing was care, the kind that didn't announce itself. I told her about a project I'd turned down 6 months ago, a corporate job, good money, the kind of work that would look good in the wrong kind of portfolio. Why did you turn it down? She asked. Because it was going to require me to make something look like it meant more than it did. She held her wine glass by the stem. I respect that. It cost me a significant amount of money. I know. I still respect it. We walked after dinner, down toward the public garden, the October air cold enough to matter, but not enough to cut. At the corner of Boylston, she stopped and looked up at a building across the street. An old converted savings bank, the classical stonework still intact above a modern retail facade. They kept the cornice, she said. Is that good? Someone cared enough to fight for it. She looked at it for another moment. That's always good. When I walked her to her car, she parked a few blocks away on Clarendon. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment in that particular silence that follows a good evening when neither person wants to be the one who ends it. This was nice, she said, which, from Ren, I had learned to translate as something closer to this mattered. It was, I said. She looked at me for a second. Then she reached up and fixed the collar of my jacket where it had folded wrong against the wind. She did it quickly, without ceremony, like it was something she had the right to do. Then she got in her car and drove away, and I stood on Clarendon Street in the cold feeling like I'd been given something I hadn't known to ask for. She didn't text that night, not the next morning either. I told myself she wasn't a frequent texter. This was true. I had gathered this over weeks, and that a good evening didn't require immediate accounting. By Sunday evening, the silence felt different. I texted once, casual. Good luck with the zoning appeal this week. 2 words back, thank you, nothing more. On Monday, nothing. Tuesday, same. By Wednesday, I had started to replay the dinner in my head, looking for the thing I had missed. I couldn't find it. The conversation had been real. The walk had been real. The collar of my jacket. I didn't imagine any of that. On Thursday morning, I went to Halcyon Books alone, which I hadn't done in 2 months. I stood in the architecture section for 10 minutes and then left without buying anything. On Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Moreau's was good. I'm sorry I went quiet. Can we talk? There's a place on Harrison Ave called Foundry Coffee. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. if you're free. I looked at the message for a long time. It had the quality of something that had been rewritten several times. The I'm sorry I went quiet especially. That wasn't the way she usually wrote. I replied, I'll be there. Foundry was a newer place, exposed brick and pendant lights, a chalkboard behind the counter with a longer menu than it needed. Ren was already there when I arrived, at a corner table with a ceramic mug in front of her, and her coat still on. Like part of her hadn't decided yet whether she was staying. Hi, I said. Hi, she wrapped both hands around her mug. Sit down. I sat. She looked at me in that direct way of hers, but without the usual evenness behind it. I handled that badly, she said. You disappeared. I know. After a good evening. I know that too. She looked down at her coffee, then back at me. I do this. Not often, but I do it. When something starts to feel like it matters, She stopped. I'm better at buildings than I am at this. What does that mean? Buildings are clear. They have load-bearing walls. You understand which elements are structural and which are decorative, and you don't confuse them. She turned her mug slowly. With people, I'd confused them before. I thought something was structural when it was decorative, and it cost me in a way that took a long time to stop posting. She said it plainly, the way she said everything, but I heard the weight under it. How long ago? I asked. 4 years, my ex-husband. She said the 2 words without drama and without flinching, which told me she had had a lot of time to practice both. He was easy to be around, good at making things seem solid. But when a real stress came, the kind that tests what's underneath, there was nothing underneath. I looked at her, and you thought I might be the same. I thought I might be the same, responding to something because it felt good rather than because it was real. That was different than what I expected her to say. And, I said. She met my eyes. I spent a week being very rigorous about whether this is something I'm choosing or something I'm falling into. Those are different things for me. What did you decide? She was quiet for a moment. That's why I texted. I leaned back in my chair and let that settle. The coffee shop moved around us, someone ordering at the counter, a couple near the window, the soft grind of the espresso machine. Between us, everything was still. I want to know one thing, I said. She waited. That first day, in Halcyon, the book on the floor, something moved across her face, brief, contained. What about it? She asked. It didn't fall. The silence that followed was about 4 seconds long. It felt longer. No, she said, it didn't. I looked at her steadily. You placed it there. She didn't look away. I had seen you in the store twice before that day. You were always in the photography section. The third time, you moved toward architecture. Her voice was careful, precise, the way it got when she was choosing every word. I had the book in my hand. I set it down near the base of the shelf before I moved to the next aisle. To see what I'd do with it. Yes. The street noise outside seemed to pull back. I looked at the table. I thought about the way she had watched me from the end of the aisle. Did it fall from a shelf? She had answered my question with a question. Technically accurate. You knew about the overlap, I said. Structural photography, architecture. I thought it might give us something to talk about. And the part where you let me think it was accidental. Yes, she said quietly, that part. I sat with that for a moment. It wasn't rage. I wasn't built for rage about things like this. But it landed somewhere real, and it stayed there. Everything after it, I said, the Saturdays, the coffee, the zoning board, and the mill in Moreau's, was that still? Real, she said, before I could finish, all of it. You could have told me earlier. I know. She didn't dress it up. I thought about it. I decided I had waited too long and that telling you would undo everything, and that was cowardly. It was. Yes. I looked at her across the table. She was sitting very straight, both hands around her mug, her coat still on. She looked less composed than I had ever seen her. Not undone. Ren was not the kind of person who came undone, but present in a way that had a cost to it. Why tell me now? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Because you said you turned down the corporate job because you didn't want to make something look like it meant more than it did. She paused. I've been making the beginning of this look like something it wasn't. And I couldn't keep doing that once I understood what I actually wanted it to be. I sat back. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, exposed ductwork, a row of Edison bulbs on a wire, and then I looked at her again. I need a few days, I said. She nodded once. No argument, no negotiation. You should have them. I put on my jacket and stood up. She stayed where she was. Ren, I said. She looked up. Thank you for telling me. I left before she could answer. The days I gave myself were ordinary in that way. The days are when your head is processing something your mouth hasn't caught up to yet. I shot a project, an office renovation in Cambridge, dull work, the kind I took to keep the lights on, and I did it well enough. I ate lunch at my desk. I called my older brother Connor on Tuesday evening and talked to him about nothing for 40 minutes and felt better in the imprecise way you do when someone who has known you a long time picks up the phone. I thought about what she had said. Not the first day thing, though I thought about that too. I kept returning to the other part. I thought I had waited too long and telling you would undo everything. Most people, when they hold a secret that could cost them, hold it tighter. She had let it go at the exact moment it was most likely to cost her. I also thought about the book on the floor. She had set it there because she wanted a way to talk to me. That was true. She had also let me believe it was an accident. That was also true. Both things lived in the same action, and I couldn't separate them out into a clean verdict. I kept coming back to the mill. The original 1890s window frame she had fought the zoning board to keep. The building has a history. You can't just decorate over it. She said it like a principle she'd staked something on. And then she had, in a small and human way, tried to decorate over the beginning of this. People were inconsistent. I knew that. I was inconsistent. The question was whether the inconsistency came from character or from fear, and those were different things. On Thursday evening, I called her. She answered on the second ring. Hi, careful, not cold. Are you at the bookstore Saturday? I asked. A pause. I could be. I'll be in the photography section at 11, I said, if you want to find me. Another pause, shorter. Okay. I got there at 10:50 and stood in front of the shelf with my arms crossed, pretending to read titles I had memorized 2 months ago. At 11:04, I heard footsteps in the aisle behind me. She came around the corner in the gray coat, no book in her hand this time, no travel mug, nothing to hold. She stopped a few feet from me. Hi, she said. Hi. I turned back to the shelf. She came and stood beside me and we both looked at the spines for a moment without speaking, which, in Halcyon Books, in the photography section on a gray Saturday in November, felt like a complete sentence. I'm not fine with it, I said. I know. The beginning should have been real. It was real, she said. The approach was wrong. I looked at her. She looked back, steady as she always was, but with that new quality underneath it, the one that had a cost. If we keep going, I said, I need to be able to trust that I know what I'm walking into. You will. That's not a small thing. I know what it costs, she said it quietly. I've paid it on the other side. I thought about her ex-husband, the things that had looked structural and weren't, the years it had taken to stop costing. Okay, I said. She didn't reach for a handshake or a hug or any of the gestures people use to seal things. She just nodded once, and then she turned to the shelf and pulled out a book. The structural photography title, the same one from the floor that first day, the one she'd set down on purpose, and held it out to me. I looked at it. Where did that come from? I bought it 3 weeks after we met, she said. I was going to give it to you at some point. I kept not finding the right moment. I took it from her. The cover was clean, no crease from being on the floor. A different copy. I turned it over and read the back, even though I already knew what it said. Then I tucked it under my arm. There's a place 2 blocks over that has decent coffee, I said. Nothing complicated. They don't have a pour-over menu. She looked at me. The small smile appeared, the real one, the one that changed her face completely when she let it. That sounds exactly right, she said. We walked out of Halcyon Books together, past the cat, who had relocated to a spot near the door and watched us leave with the particular indifference of an animal who had seen many stories begin in that room and had formed no opinions about any of them. The November air hit us both at once and Wren pulled her coat tighter. I did not offer my arm yet, and she did not take it yet, but we walked close enough that our shoulders nearly touched and neither of us moved away, and that was enough to start with. I've thought a lot about that book on the floor. Not the second copy, the clean one Wren bought 3 weeks after we met and kept waiting for the right moment to give me. The first one, the one she set down on purpose and let me believe had fallen. It was a small thing. That's what I kept telling myself during those 2 days I gave myself to think. It was a small deception, not a cruel one. She hadn't lied to hurt me. She had done what people do when they want something and don't yet know if they're allowed to want it. She created an opening and stepped back to see what I'd do with it. But here's what I've come to understand. The size of a dishonesty doesn't determine its weight. What matters is what it was protecting. Ren wasn't protecting herself from consequences. She was protecting herself from hope. There's a difference, and it took me a while to see it clearly. She had loved someone who turned out to be decorative where he needed to be structural. And that kind of loss doesn't just teach you to be careful. It teaches you to pre-edit the story before anyone else can get it wrong. Setting that book down was her way of writing the first line before the fear could stop her entirely. That's not something I can be angry at. I tried. The anger didn't hold. What stayed with me instead was the harder question. What do you do when someone shows you their reasoning, and their reasoning makes sense, but the action it produced was still wrong? I think you hold both things at once. You say, I understand why, and that still wasn't right in the same breath, without letting either one cancel the other out. That's not easy. It requires a kind of honesty that most of us avoid because it doesn't resolve cleanly. Ren told me the truth when she didn't have to. That's the part I keep returning to. She could have carried that small secret indefinitely, and I never would have known. Instead, she sat across from me at Foundry with her coat still on and said it didn't fall and waited. That took something real. Not the dramatic courage of a grand gesture, the quieter, harder kind that doesn't come with applause, the kind where you tell the truth specifically because it might cost you everything you've been carefully building. I think that's what integrity actually looks like in practice, not the absence of mistakes, but what you do with them once you've made them. Whether you protect the mistake or you offer it up. Ren offered it up. And I had to decide something too. I had to decide whether I was the kind of person who could take an honest accounting of a situation, the good and the flawed together, and make a clear-eyed choice about it. Not a reactive one, not one driven by wounded pride or by the easier warmth of just forgiving everything because I wanted to. A real choice, made with both eyes open. That's what those 2 days were for, not punishment, thought. I walked back into Halcyon Books on Saturday because I had thought it through and I knew what I wanted. Ren walked in because she had too. We didn't arrive at that corner of the photography section by accident, either of us, this time. That felt like the right way to start something.